Who is this Sylvia Likens?
Sylvia Likens, a sweet 16-year-old girl, was born into a life of instability. Her parents, Lester and Betty Likens, were carnival workers, often traveling for work, leaving Sylvia and her sister Jenny in the care of others. In the summer of 1965, after their mother was jailed for shoplifting, Sylvia and Jenny were placed under the supervision of a woman named Gertrude Baniszewski, a neighbor in Indianapolis, for a fee of $20 a week. Gertrude's home was a chaotic place, filled with her 7 children, ranging in age from infants to teenagers. Initially, things seemed fine, but soon after the Likens sisters arrived, a sinister change overtook the household. From the outside, the arrangement seemed like a simple babysitting gig. However, what awaited Sylvia behind the closed doors of Gertrude's rundown house was a horror beyond comprehension. What began as minor scoldings and chores turned into a twisted nightmare, fueled by Gertrude's resentment, poverty, and unchecked cruelty.
Early signs of abuse.
The abuse Sylvia endured began with small acts of cruelty. Gertrude, a bitter and frail woman, frequently lashed out at Sylvia's, as her parents were late in sending their weekly payments for the girls' care, and Gertrude took this out on Sylvia, unfairly blaming her for the family's financial struggles. Accusations of uncleanliness and false claims about Sylvia's supposed sexual activity led to physical punishments, slaps, kicks, and punches. Soon, the abuse intensified. Sylvia was regularly beaten in her butt with belts and paddles, often in front of Gertrude's children, who were encouraged to join in. Gertrude began targeting Sylvia with disturbing accusations of promiscuity, despite there being no evidence to support them. These baseless claims set the stage for an escalation of violence that would reach monstrous levels.
Dehumanization act begins.
As weeks passed, Sylvia's life became a living hell. She was starved, forced to sleep on the floor, and subjected to continuous beatings. Gertrude's obsession with Sylvia's supposed immorality grew into a sadistic fixation. The children in the neighborhood were encouraged to take part in Sylvia's abuse. They would often come over to Gertrude's house to witness and participate in Sylvia's torment, as if it were a grotesque spectacle for their amusement. Gertrude's daughter, Paula, was particularly cruel. She, along with her siblings, began to treat Sylvia not as a human being, but as an object for their violent whims. Sylvia's cries for help and mercy fell on deaf ears. Her suffering was ignored by the very people who should have protected her.
The sexual violence and degradation.
The abuse Sylvia faced wasn't only physical, it turned into something far more depraved. Gertrude, in her warped view of morality, Sylvia mentioned having a boyfriend. Gertrude accused her of being sexually active, labeling her as a prostitute. These accusations were used to justify sexual humiliation and violence, adding yet another layer to the torture. Gertrude allowed and even encouraged the children in the neighborhood to beat Sylvia, often charging them 5 cents to come into the house and witness or participate in the abuse. Sylvia became a target, not just for Gertrude's twisted cruelty, but for the sadistic pleasure of an entire group of people. People who took advantage of Sylvia's helplessness and isolation. One of the most infamous incidents occurred when Gertrude forced Sylvia to strip naked in front of the children. Sylvia, humiliated and terrified, stood exposed as Gertrude and her children mocked her body. But the worst was yet to come. In a particularly horrifying act of sexual violence, Gertrude and her children inserted a glass Pepsi bottle into Sylvia's vagina, leaving her physically and emotionally scarred. This act of violation wasn't just about inflicting pain. It was about stripping away Sylvia's dignity and reducing her to something less than human. Sylvia was also forced to masturbate in front of the children, using various objects, including bottles and sticks. These acts were meant to humiliate her, to degrade her, and to break her spirit. They made her feel shame for for things she never did, exploiting her vulnerability in the most repugnant way possible. Gertrude's obsession with Sylvia's sexuality was a twisted justification for these acts of perversion. But the horror didn't stop there.
Forced to eat her own feces.
As Sylvia's physical condition deteriorated, Gertrude began depriving her of basic necessities, food, water, and even access to the bathroom. Sylvia was forced to urinate and defecate on herself, as she wasn't allowed to use the toilet. And in one of the most degrading and inhumane acts, Gertrude made Sylvia eat her own feces. The psychological torment Sylvia experienced during these acts of forced degradation is unimaginable. It was as if Gertrude wanted to erase Sylvia's identity, her humanity, and her sense of self-worth, by forcing her to do things that no human being should ever endure. Gertrude and her followers sought to strip Sylvia of her dignity and leave her broken in body, mind, and spirit.
Carved and branded.
In perhaps the most well-known act of torture, Gertrude decided to brand Sylvia as a prostitute. Using a heated needle, Gertrude's son, John Jr., was forced to carve the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," into Sylvia's stomach. The branding wasn't just a mark of physical pain, it was a cruel statement of ownership and degradation. Sylvia, weakened by months of starvation, beatings, and sexual abuse, could do little more than weep as her skin was burned and scarred. Her body had become a canvas for Gertrude's cruelty, and her spirit was slowly being crushed under the weight of unimaginable suffering.
The final days.
By October 1965, Sylvia Likens was no longer the bright, caring girl she once had been. She could barely speak, barely move. Her body was covered in bruises, cuts, burns, and the scars of unimaginable torture. Despite her desperate condition, Gertrude continued to torment Sylvia, blaming her for the circumstances of her own torture. On October 25, 1965, after months of relentless abuse, Sylvia's body could no longer endure the suffering. She died from a combination of brain hemorrhage, shock, and malnutrition. She was only 16 years old.
A disturbing discovery.
When the police arrived, they found Sylvia's battered body lying on a spoiled mattress in the filthy home. At first, Gertrude attempted to lie, claiming Sylvia had run away and returned home in that condition. But the truth of Sylvia's torture was undeniable. The evidence of the months-long abuse, neglect, and torture was etched into her skin and her broken bones. As the investigation unfolded, the full scale of Sylvia's suffering came to light. The entire nation was shocked by the depravity of the crime. The trial revealed how not just Gertrude, but her children and several neighborhood kids had actively participated in the abuse. Gertrude Baniszewski was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, though she would later be released on parole in 1985.
Sylvia's legacy.
The murder of Sylvia Likens is a haunting reminder of the potential for cruelty within humanity. It is a story of how a young girl, innocent and vulnerable, was subjected to the worst kinds of torture by those who should have protected her. It is a reminder of the importance of speaking out against abuse and of standing up for those who cannot defend themselves. In Indianapolis, a memorial now stands in Sylvia's honor, serving as a testament to the life that was taken from her and a warning to future generations. The inscription reads, "This memorial is in memory of a young child who died a horrific death at the hands of abusers. She did not die in vain. Her memory lives on and will continue to live on as a reminder of the importance of helping children who are suffering." Share your thought in the comment and make sure to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you in the next episode of Secret Trails.